Alright, so this took a little longer than I had expected, but this is going to be my spoiler review of the game and some thoughts and things I like, things I didn't like, and obviously I did finish the game at this point. I am still very much in the process of doing side quests and all the extra goodies that this game has to offer. I am going to eventually do a hardcore run too. I'm probably going to post more videos around this game in the future. For now, this is just going to be my overall thoughts on the game, talking about the visuals, sounds, gameplay, and of course, the story. So let's just get into it already. And again, there will be spoilers here. So for visuals, I feel like this game looks amazing when it wants to. Basically, the biggest issue for me in this game is the character models. When light hits them in certain ways, they can just look really off. Just really depends how the light hits them. Now, usually in games like this, you wouldn't be super zoomed in on character models anyways. So it is kind of minor, but there are a lot of loading screens where you're in elevators, and that forces you to look at the characters close up, and then you're seeing the models close up. So then it becomes very noticeable at that point, and sometimes just in the fields or in the sunlight, the characters just look gaunt and not right. Some of the NPCs also look a little worse for wear. You get some texture pop-ins, and view distance can definitely be a thing, but I wouldn't say any of these are glaring or completely awful by any means. Unfortunately, though, one of the first areas you go into is a large, well-lit area, and so these things are much more noticeable there. Maybe I just got used to them. I don't think that's the case. And while this does sound like a big ding against it, it wasn't terrible, like I said. I mean, it wasn't game-breaking, and games this large with this much graphic fidelity do have inconsistencies to them, so it was kind of expected that it wouldn't run perfectly. Maybe it didn't live up to the PS5 next-gen promises people had. But when it comes to the cutscenes, man, these things are mind-blowing. There's a range of graphical inconsistency in the cutscenes as well. Some just look a step above the rest of them. One of them that comes to mind for me right now is the Loveless cutscene, as well as a lot of the ones at the end of the game. They just look way better than some of the ones you see in the beginning of the game. Some of these scenes, like the Loveless and at the end, they have some of the most beautiful imagery I've seen a PS5 produce. And outside of just graphics, there's the choreography and the visuals in the cutscenes. And again, like with the Loveless play and some of the non-cutscene choreography, even like when you go against the Turks and stuff, is just, honestly, some of this choreography is way better than some of the movies out there right now. And all the regions of this game also have their own visual identity to them, and there's a good diversity in the regions. It does kind of feel like there's two deserts though a little bit, as Corel is a huge area, and it has a mix of beach, jungle, and desert. The Coral Desert though does feel different. It has a more of a Dust Bowl feel to it, and it has more industrialized ruins, where Cosmo Canyon, the other desert, is a more vertical desert. It's littered with ancient ruins, but again, it does feel like there's two deserts. Kind of surprised there wasn't a snow region in the game, but we are heading north, so that's definitely going to be coming, I'm sure. Despite the funky models at times though, this game isn't perfect, but it definitely is one of the best visually looking realistic games out right now, I feel. My personal favorite region of this game is Gungaga. It's the big, lush, dense jungle region of the game, but it can be one of the most annoying regions to get through and navigate, but thankfully it has one of the best themes in the game, which is my segue now to what the game sounds like. Now, when it comes to the sound and audio in this game, they completely outdid themselves. Growing up, I always just think Zelda had the best music, and Final Fantasy was always a somewhat close second. And I've even been to orchestra concerts for both of these game franchises. And now, more so than ever, I think Final Fantasy has the best music in gaming. The diversity and the range of this game is just simply astounding. There's a song for pretty much everything in the game, and there were so many moments of this game where you're just walking to a new region or you enter a battle and you kind of just want to pause and listen to the music because it's just so good. And the way that they use the music to crescendo into key plot points and set the tone and enhance the cutscenes, it's all just really good and really awe-inspiring. And the voice acting for the main cast is, as you would expect, on point like it was in the last game. This whole game is fully voice acted. Some of the characters can seem a little bit off with their voices, but given a game of this style, I'm going to give a little leeway to the random one-off NPCs. I also thought the way they used Red 13's voice to enhance his story was super well done. Red puts on this intellectual voice so people take him seriously and don't see him as a pet. And when you reach his home, he starts having a more childlike voice, acting like a puppy again, because although Red is in his 40s, he's actually about 16 years old and a child in his race. This voice change was jarring at first, and it was teased actually throughout the game early on, as you hear Aerith talking to someone and you don't know who the hell she's talking to. So it created a little bit of mystery to it as well. To me, this is a great way that they've used voice acting to further enhance the story. I just thought it really enhanced Red 13's story overall, and the way he flips back and forth is pretty interesting too, how when he wants to be seen as serious, he will speak in a serious voice, or even when he just wants to tell a story about pirates.
Based on a true story. How about it? Want to hear?
Yeah.
Gather round and hearken to my tale. The four steel birds.
I did encounter some audio issues though, and this was mostly during side quests. Sometimes the music would just be so loud during these cutscenes that I could not really hear the NPCs talking at all. And also when you're exploring the world, sometimes your group will start interacting with each other and spark up a conversation. The problem with this though is no matter what happens, they will keep talking. So if you go into a battle, or worse, you trigger Chadley yapping about something, they'll just keep talking and you really couldn't hear them over the battle or Chadley telling you all these new things about the world. I recently played Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and they had an awesome mechanic when it came to the characters talking, interacting with each other, where when they started a conversation, if you ended up getting into some type of event like a battle, they would just stop, and then after the event concluded, all the characters would say, where were we again? And then they'd pick up the conversation again. So that's something I'd like to see, maybe put that mechanic in the next game, because that's something I wish I had, because sometimes they were in conversations that I wanted to hear, and then all of a sudden Chadley's talking about a crystal that I kind of didn't care about at the time. Overall, I probably will be listening to the soundtrack for years, and I'm already trying to figure out where I'm going to see the Rebirth Orchestra concert. So the sound and everything in this game is, again, just amazing. Maybe even one of the stronger aspects of it. And the last topic before I hop into the story is gameplay. It's really amazing gameplay, but it does take a little bit to click with you in my opinion. It's basically the exact same thing as it was in Remake. The materia system's pretty much the same, and I'm not going to mechanically break the whole thing down because it was the same, but they did tweak some characters and add a few new layers to it. Biggest thing they added was the synergy abilities. Honestly, for the first chunk of the game, I quite frankly just forgot I even had these things. Basically, two characters will do a move, a combo move together. Visually, these things are pretty cool. There are two versions. There's a quick one and a fast one. Quick ones usually help you do certain things like get a melee character airborne or help you deflect or defend yourself against certain types of attacks. There are the more important ones though that give you the cool cutscenes, and these ones give you bigger buffs and help you out more. You get things like more ATB gauges, you can get 0 MP costs on spells, you can even get your limit upgraded, so these things are actually really useful, and once I started using them more, I was kind of wondering why the hell I wasn't using them to begin with. They're a great addition, and later on in the game it kind of requires you to use these more and more, which is when I started using them more, because in order to pressure enemies you start needing to use these. So overall, these synergy abilities are just a great addition to the already good combat from the last game. Now when it comes to character tweaks, they did tweak Cloud. His main thing now is that he has ranged moves in his basic melee attacks, so when you dodge and attack right away, he'll shoot these little wind blasts. He can also dash to a foe in the air if you hold the button down. And the other character that got a slight tweak was Aerith. She can actually teleport to her wards now, just super useful, because before you'd put like the double spell ward down and then the NPC of Aerith would run to the other side of the map, and then if you wanted to cast a spell with Aerith, you'd have to run all the way back. Now if they do that, you can just hit triangle and teleport right to the ward, and boom, you're good to go with Aerith. Now Red 13 and Kate Sith are the new kids on the block, and they're the new characters you get to play. Honestly, Red to me felt like old Cloud a little bit, because he doesn't have any ranged melee moves. He has to kind of get in and do his stuff. He does also have another stance, his vengeance stance, but it comes with a meter instead, and it fills up his vengeance gauge. This gauge allows him to empower his attacks or gives him access to new ones, so he's a little bit different. And Kate Sith, he's wild. He has ranged and physical attacks, but most of his moves revolve around him summoning his Moogle mount, and once he's on this mount, he can't dodge anymore, and he gets access to some very unique moves on the Moogle, and some of them are luck of the dice or setting up the Moogle to where it explodes when it dies, and you can even let the Moogle run off and do its own thing. I actually really enjoyed Kate Sith. I thought he was super interesting, and I love the random RNG chances on some of his moves. I just thought it was fun. I love how every single one of these characters though, even the original cast, do play differently from one another. It brings a lot of diversity to the game, and the game forces you to use certain characters in certain situations. And with the new synergy abilities and the materia, there's just tons of combinations you can do, and it really just breeds player diversity, so everyone can play this game a little bit differently. There are also two other characters you get to play as. Unfortunately, they are not Sid or Vincent. They are Zack and Sephiroth. Play with them in their various story parts. You also get to do a combat simulator specifically with them later on, but they both play pretty straightforward, and then I don't want to spend too much time really talking about them. I did play this game on dynamic mode. That means the game always adjusts to your skill level or character level. Basically, to me, what it felt like is I would kind of steamroll enemies for a while, and then all of a sudden enemies would take away huge chunks of my health all at once, and I would do little damage, and maybe they'd even almost one-shot me at times. It was mostly with the trash mobs I felt this way. Honestly, I could have just been under-leveled because I did kind of rush through the game a little bit in the beginning. At times, this does force you to be more tactical, which that's something I enjoyed. The bosses also felt strong but fair. If you don't pay attention to what they're doing, doing, you could easily end up losing. You have to basically understand their mechanics and what they're doing or you'll lose. I'm planning to eventually upload my first playthrough. It just takes a long time to get all the stuff rendered and put up. You'll see plenty of times in that where I have lost to bosses from lack of understanding or just being overzealous and trying to think I can ignore mechanics when indeed I cannot. Now, outside of combat, there are tons of mini games. They really took a page out of the Yakuza book here. You have the game Queen's Blood, which is a card game, The Return of Fort Condor. You have Punch-Out, Star Fox, Frog Guys. You have Dog League, which is Rocket League. You have Mario Kart. Many, many more. All these games also have a normal difficulty and a hard mode difficulty, as well as all of them having their own unique music and unique animations, and it's just really overwhelming with the amount of content and effort they put into these mini games. As for world exploration, at times it can actually feel kind of janky, I feel. I'm not going after you. Jesus. Where the fuck did you go? And it gets kind of weird on what you can jump on and what you can jump off of. I think it works best in the open areas like grasslands and deserts, but once you get to the more vertical areas like Cosmo Canyon or Gungaga, it can get really annoying to figure out how to navigate. You do get chocobos and buggies to help you get around sometimes, but nothing beats fast travel when you have access to it. And basically when you complete anything on the map, you can then fast travel to it, which is super helpful. And Chadley gives you tons of stuff to do on the map and tons of information. And these come in the form of lookout towers, rare fights, analyzing materia growths, proto-materia quests, all kinds of stuff. And the rewards for these are actually really good. You get materia, you get summons, you get new items that you can craft. That's all really good stuff. I really like how the game encourages you to explore a lot, but Chadley can be super relentless and annoying when he's constantly talking to you saying, hey Cloud, check this out, look it over here, do this, do that. And I don't know why they had to make a whole animation where you stop and take your stupid little cell phone thing out and look at it and put it away. I just don't see why he couldn't have been just a face in the corner, or they just Metal Gear Solid it at the top of the screen and had him talk to you. Like, I feel like that's something they could do something in the next game, is make him a little less relentless when he's talking to you. Again, I just really do love the fact that they encourage you to explore the map. Exploring the game after I beat it was pretty blissful. Each character does have their own gameplay sections in the story where they're pretty much the main character. Most of these are pretty well done. A couple of them tend to be mines. There is the one, though, with Katesith, where you're in Shinra Manor, and it's bad. Basically, you just roll through air vents and you throw boxes onto elevators and do, like, very basic weight-themed puzzles. It just, I don't know. I feel like if I was to remove one thing from the game, this section would probably be it. That said, I do enjoy the combat with Katesith, but again, this was just not that enjoyable. I feel like they had to do something with the trackpad, like it was a requirement. There's also the relationship mechanic in this game. It's done with such a light touch, it honestly feels like it's not there most of the time. Yeah, you see little smiley faces and colors, but they don't really mean anything, I feel. Maybe I'm missing something here. It does influence the way certain cutscenes roll out, but once you beat the game, you can manually pick who you want for the cutscenes. So, I don't know. The relationship thing just kind of felt like it was taped on, but I am kind of glad I didn't have to figure out Yuffie's favorite flower and deliver her bouquets all the time, because that would have drove me insane. So when it comes to visuals, the sound, and the gameplay alone, even if you take the story out, or if the story was complete ass, which, hey, to some people it might be, I feel like it's a great game to just play overall. But let's talk about the reason why people play Final Fantasies for the most part, and that is the story. So I'm obviously going to have some bias here, because I obviously like the overall remake story and where it's going, and that's why I've made some content around these games, because I generally enjoy them. And I'm still cooking my theories of where I think this game's going to eventually go. I'm planning a separate video to talk about all those previous theories and where I went wrong, where I was right, and how my bingo card went. I'm also thinking of doing more detailed series on the individual characters and talking about them specifically, about what I like and dislike about them and their roles in the story. So if you're interested in something like that, check the magic buttons and let me know what character I should maybe even start doing first. But for now, let's just talk about the story as a whole and the events that went down. And I'm going to do a quick overview, just really quick, and then I'll give my thoughts on the details and what I liked and what I didn't like. Like Remake, though, this story does actually pretty closely follow the events of the original structure. It does deviate in some subtle ways, as well as some very wild and crazy ways. So Rufus and Zack interludes aside, the main story, like I said, just follows the original. So we were following the black robed guys who want to join in the reunion with Sephiroth, which that's kind of the motivating force that leads you on most of your journey. Sephiroth keeps harassing Cloud, breaks his brain more and more, telling him to join in the reunion, eventually him telling Cloud to bring him the black materia, and how Sephiroth wants to use the black materia to end all things. And so we try to beat him to the punch and get the black materia first, but of course Cloud's brain is broken, so he tries to deliver that materia to Sephiroth. The group then tries to help Aerith get her white materia together to counter what Sephiroth is doing and defeat him. Again, Sephiroth does kill Aerith, and this game ends with Cloud having both the white and black materia, and the group ultimately is going to head north in the next game. Cloud is being driven by the fact that he still wants to rejoin in the reunion.
The reunion.
But Aerith is seemingly guiding him as well now and being a little voice in his head. I'll talk about that more later on. But ultimately, Cloud and Aerith make promises to each other that they're going to do their part to defeat Sephiroth.
You promise?
Some of the newer elements find out Rufus is essentially obsessed with the idea of finding the Promised Land. Personally believe Aerith ultimately wants to guide people to the Promised Land as well, but Rufus believes it's an actual physical place. But he's being very distracted because he's trying to wage war with Wutai, and you eventually find out Rufus is essentially being manipulated by Sephiroth and Jenova in order to wage this war, and the whole plan here is that Rufus would wage war and then it would become one world government, probably ideally rule over that one world government. However, Sephiroth basically reveals to him, well, Sephiroth and Jenova take on the form of Glenn, a previous soldier that Rufus kills. By doing all this World War stuff is essentially distracting President Shinra from finding the Promised Land and worrying about Aerith. Is actually bringing the world closer to Jenova and Sephiroth's goals of building their Promised Land, which essentially is everyone becoming part of Jenova. I do like all these new elements with Rufus a lot. We know in the original game that he eventually does have his kind of turn good moment where he starts trying to undo some of the stuff Shinra does. Obviously we're a little bit away from there, but ideally I'd like to see how this plays out. I think him and Aerith kind of actually share the same goals, so maybe there'll be some type of connection or joining together at some point. Then of course you've got the more controversial new thing to the story, which is the multiverse and the Zack interludes. And now through Zack's story, we see this world, the Terrier timeline. It has a tear in the sky and the world is doomed to fail. And that's what this tear in the sky means, is that the world is ending, and that is the exact same tear we see in the sky, or Cloud only can see it, but we see it in the sky at the end of the game. Long story short on Zack, he's a voice of hope in this destitute world that's fated to end. We see Biggs, and yeah, basically everyone in this world is just giving up. We see that through Biggs, we see it through Elmira, even Marlene's kind of giving up, like she thinks she's never going to see her dad or never see anyone again, and Zack's just trying to change things and make things better and do what he does, which is try to be that voice of hope and encourage people and inspire people to do better and change things. I'll talk more about some of these details and the chaos around the end scene that all this multiverse stuff brings, but ultimately it ends with Zack being thrown across the multiverse multiple times through his own actions, by Aerith and by Sephiroth as well. Zack's story ultimately ends with him destitute in another universe. He's still forever hopeful here, and he's thinking to himself that, well, I could change fate, and if worlds came together once, they can come together again. So he's forever hopeful and going to try to find everyone. That's kind of the very Cliff Notes version of the overall story. I'll simply state by saying I do really enjoy this story. It's continuing in a direction that I do like and personally appreciate, but I can see how introducing the ideas and concepts of a multiverse to an already established story can be heavily off-putting for some, especially given the rap it kind of has right now. If you aren't familiar with Final Fantasy VII lore though, some of these things and events can seem very confusing. And to be fair, this is done by design. I don't think it's Kingdom Hearts level as confusing and convolution that some people are claiming it is. That just seems like a bit of a stretch to me. To me, this seems like a much more simpler, condensed multiverse, at least for now anyways. I get people hate it because they feel stakes don't matter now and anything can happen, but it does seem like a more tame multiverse, and that doesn't seem to really be the case, at least from my perspective, but who knows, that could further change down the line. But again, it did cause a lot of chaos and clutter, specifically around Aerith's death scene, and I think that's where I'm going to start going over things I like and don't like and talk about Aerith's scene. So, again, like I said, because of the multiverse stuff, it's a little bit confusing. I kind of predicted before that there would be a Schrodinger's Aerith situation going on, and that's pretty much what's happening. It does, to me, feel somewhat unnecessary that they showed the scenario where Cloud ends up saving Aerith. I think that Aerith that Cloud saved is the one he went on a date with in the other timeline. Don't necessarily have anything to prove that, but that's kind of the feeling I'm getting right now. Now, while these events all around Aerith's death and seeing her live and die, and kind of Cloud being able to see her now wherever he walks, sort of like how he sees visions of Sephiroth. I think these events are handled maybe not in the best way, but I think it overall is kind of pretty well done in my opinion. As a standalone, it can be a little confusing, and I think once we see the bigger picture though, it'll make sense, sort of like how the events of Remake didn't make much sense, but now they kind of do make more sense. So I think it's just once we see the bigger picture, a lot of these things will start clicking together and we'll start seeing more cohesiveness here. We also never see the famous water scene where he lets Aerith go into the water. Along with the scene of him throwing Sephiroth into the Mako and all the true events that happen in Nibelheim, we don't see any of those. I think this is done because Cloud, from our perspective in the game, still doesn't know his true past, and he blocks out basically any moments of trauma in his life. So in my opinion, that's why we haven't seen these things yet, and that's why we didn't see Aerith's death, is because he's essentially blocking that out. And obviously these revelations with Cloud are something they're going to hold on to the next game, where he ultimately remembers who he is and all the events that he's been through. Also on the Zack stuff, I got basically what I wanted out of Zack's character. Maybe not the displaced throughout the multiverse thing, but I mentioned in my Trollbait video that I wanted to see a more mature Zack who is taking back his life, and that's essentially exactly what we got. That's what he tells Biggs, and I like what they're doing with him there. People say it doesn't matter, his interludes are a waste of time, and it serves real no purpose. Again, we haven't seen the whole big picture yet, so could they be right? Maybe, but we really won't know until the next game, and I get it, that's kind of what people said about Remake. What's the purpose of Zack being alive? Well, we won't know till the next game. They're obviously setting up a lot with him, so I'll speak more on my theories of how Zack's gonna get involved in everything later though. I do feel like the game's story overall takes a little too long to get going. It's kind of a bit of a slow burn in the beginning when you're constantly chasing the black robe guys. Random side thought, why are there no female robed guys? Just not allowed to be soldiers, or can we just not tell because of the robes, or just Jenova just not want any other bitches around? Like, I don't know, just a random side thought I had. At the start of the game, I just feel like it really takes a while to pick up and get moving and get going. When it does start going, it's kind of crazy. It's almost relentless at times. It gives you time to process sometimes, and there's some times where it's just like boom, boom, boom. You don't get much time to really think about what's going on. Also, at the start of the game, I didn't feel that connection that the party shares yet. Maybe it's just me. Everyone at the start of the game kind of just felt like they were loose acquaintances with each other, or like they just randomly met up. Now, you do start to really care about these characters, and you do really start to see their connection a lot. I would say around Costa del Sol, which is maybe about the midpoint of the game, you really start to see the relationships with each other, how they interact with each other, how they care for each other, etc. And all that's really well done. But yeah, at the start of the game, it just kind of felt like a group of random folks, in my opinion. And overall, though, I do love the interactions they all have with each other eventually. They all have their own unique story. You get to see all the different bonds they have with each other. They all grow with each other and share events with each other. Honestly, I think some of the best parts of this game are the character-driven story parts, which is kind of why I want to make separate videos about each of them individually. But I think one of the best and most emotional parts of this game was all the trials that we go through in the Temple of the Ancients with every character, as every character except for Cloud gets a trial. Cloud doesn't get one because he doesn't remember his past and his past traumas. That's at least my thought on it. But basically every character, Barrett, Tifa, Red, and Aerith and Yuffie, all relive what makes them them and their past traumas, and you get to see their pain and suffering and where their strength comes from. And I thought all those scenes were just really well done and super good. And Aerith's speech at the end, yeah, it was a little cheesy of how, you know, worst moments make you as strong as you can be, but I thought it was good overall. And then especially how it shows Cloud's descent into madness, I guess, how he just doesn't care about the speech and just asks her if she's done. I just thought that whole section with all of that was maybe the strongest part in the game, in my opinion. Sephiroth is making Cloud his puppet way more in this game, and it's brought up way more, which is kind of ironic because Sephiroth is essentially a puppet of Jenova. But the way he makes Cloud doubt if Tifa's even real, and how ultimately Cloud ends up attacking Tifa and knocking her into the life stream, I thought that was all super well done. I did kind of feel like that Tifa scene was a little bit of them redoing the Barrett dying card and bringing him back, so kind of annoying they're doing the same story beat, and they'll probably do it again in the next one. I also found it interesting that the game references Jenova way more, I feel like, and keeps harping on the fact that she's trying to take over humans and all of this. I think they're even tying her into the history of the Gi, which I think is interesting. But it seems like she's having a bigger overall presence moving forward. I think that kind of might mean that we may get that situation of a Sephiroth who's not influenced or fallen to her, but that's a big theory. That's a big stretch. Not going to get into it right now, but it does seem like they want us to clearly know that there is a Genova and she does manipulate people, and ultimately these are her specific goals. And yeah, just Cloud's overall descent into becoming a darker and darker character at times, not just an asshole. He is definitely an asshole at certain parts, especially towards Tifa when he's definitely in his head, just falling apart more or less. I think the Temple of the Ancients, when he's just driven like a crackhead trying to get his hit and get this black materia, and he just slowly becomes this murderous, unconcerning killer, and you just see him murder soldiers, and Tifa and Barrett are kind of like, whoa dude. And when he does it, he's just saying how death is a homecoming, you should be happy, and he even goes on to try to kill the Turks in one cutscene and ultimately gets stopped, which the Turks did drop the plate on Sector 7 and they killed a bunch of people and destroyed their homes. Similar vein in that is how Aerith tells Red to not pursue Hojo at Costa de la Sol. Given how many lives Hojo's fucked with, just kind of seems odd. Same with the Turks. Like, maybe you should maybe it's not the worst idea, but hey, you need the Turks around still for story. Same with Hojo, so I get it. I really liked Roche, and I liked the whole process of his degradation. I thought that was a good story element to add in. He was a little crazy and weird in Junon. A lot of that whole Junon section, I think, kind of was a little silly, although the assassination stuff with Yuffie was really good. It was entertaining enough, but I thought it was just kind of weird how the 7th was whole super loyal to Cloud and the whole arena thing. It was a little on the goofier side. I also wasn't a huge fan of Gus. I didn't like having to run around town and get all the Geshla greens for the Chocobo. Just kind of found it annoying. Actually, I found a lot of stuff around acquiring Chocobos to be kind of annoying, to be frank. I didn't like the sneaking stuff. I didn't like all the little mini games that you played around Chocobos. Obviously, Chocobo racing's awesome, but just a lot of the stuff around Chocobos I didn't find overall enjoyable. But a lot of that goofiness is part of the nature of 7, and actually something I like, just I didn't like those particular instances. Temple of the Ancients, I think some of the best stuff in the game happens then. The dungeon itself takes way too long in my opinion. I think it's just too long. Not just with Cloud, but also when Aerith is running around twirling her little magic wand around doing all that stuff. I just felt like it overstayed its welcome and could have been cut down a little bit. Some of the newer elements as well were Aerith and Red 13. They both lost their abilities that they gained in Remake, which allowed them to essentially use the whispers and look into the future and see the fate of the planet. They do have some fragmented memories, at least Red 13 confirms that. Aerith's materia has also lost its color in our timeline and it's gone completely clear. So we actually get to explain Materia's memories of the planet.
Materia is formed from the life stream itself. Orbs infused with knowledge, memories.
So obviously we need to get the memories back in the white materia to save the day, which kind of predicted that was going to more or less happen. Speaking of memories, like I said, Cloud still doesn't remember his past memories. We never see him throwing Sephiroth in the Mako yet. We don't have the whole Nibelheim revelation scene yet, so that's obviously going to come in the next game and be a big revelation, and they're holding on for that in the third game. Also, most of the character development around Cid and Vincent is going to be in the next game. They both have their small moments here. We learn that Cid actually has a history with Aerith and Aerith's mother. Maybe he transported them to safety at some point. But other than that, we really get no backstory much on Cid at all. Same with Vincent. We learn he's a Turk. That's kind of about it. He's there, but barely. If you told me he wasn't in the game, I don't think anything would really change too much. Cait Sith also, we still don't have the big reveal that Cait Sith is Reeves, even though they are heavily hinting it. I mean, you literally see a Cait Sith doll sitting on Reeves' desk at a couple points in the story. They haven't directly told us, but there's a lot of clues, which I appreciate that. But yeah, I think Cloud, Cid, Vincent, and Cait Sith, they're kind of going to get their big trauma, reliving them, telling us, dumping all that lore on us in the next game, where this game focused on Red, Tifa, Barrett, and Yuffie, and Aerith. Now, of course, as predicted, this game does end on a cliffhanger. That was to be expected because we know there's another one coming. At the end, Cloud has that clear white materia, and he's secretly holding onto the black materia in his Buster Sword. It also seems that maybe he's under the influence of Aerith now, so he's going to see images of Aerith and Sephiroth, and maybe it'll be like little angel on his shoulder thing. Maybe the next game will even have like a good and bad ending, depending on who you listen to, but that's a bit of a stretch, so we're We're not going to get into that too much right now, but we do see him say goodbye to Aerith at the end, so maybe that was just kind of a temporarily thing. But as I predicted, I think Zack and Aerith are going to be kind of reliving the memories of the planet and jumping around and kind of making that white materia Cloud has start filling up and become clouded with the memories again. I had a lot of theories around that, but I'll talk about theories and stuff in a separate video. Now, all of this multiverse stuff that they introduced can be very off-putting for some people. This concept's been around since the Greek times, so it's just a tool of storytelling and a method. It's not something that Marvel or DC created. It's just way more popular and way more mainstream now. This is a crutch that some weaker stories can use to try to make things more interesting, or when they write themselves into a hole as a way to get out. So because of that, it does have a bad rep now. I don't think that because something has a multiverse in it, it's just auto bad now. I think that's kind of ignorant. It's just a tool for storytelling. It can be used in a good way or a bad way. But yeah, my final thoughts on Rebirth are, I think the game's amazing. It did feel like, even though I think the game is amazing, I think it did take a long time to kind of get moving. But once it got moving, it's amazing. There's no other way to really put it. It is relentless at times, and it doesn't give you enough room to process sometimes everything that's happening, especially during the end. But I think this is one of like the most Final Fantasy games we've had in a very long time. I think all the gameplay elements, the sense of adventure, the whole package of everything, even if you take the story out of it, I think this is essentially like what people have been wanting out of a Final Fantasy in a very long time. Since Final Fantasy 13, a lot of them have been very controversial on the love and hate. I personally enjoyed Final Fantasy 16 a lot, but it did have some glaring flaws, like all the side content was pretty ass in that game. But this game doesn't really have any glaring flaws. I think the biggest things that I mentioned was the Kate Sith and Cindermana sucked, but the character models is probably one of the bigger things, is they can look weird sometimes, but that's not an always thing, that's a sometimes thing. Also, the fact that traversal can be a little clunky at times is a little annoying, but again, none of it's game breaking and none of it's so jarring that it completely ruins everything. But overall, I feel like the way this game presented itself and handled everything, and the gameplay and the side mechanics and just the whole package in general, just completely blows Final Fantasy 16 out of the water. Basically, the last few Final Fantasy games just lapse them. And I know, obviously, the story and how it's brought in a multiverse now, it's not going to be for everyone. But to me, overall, I think everything story-wise, all the individual character stories, the overall story, bringing in the new elements, I think it's all super well done. And it's a very unique way to revisit an old franchise. And it seems all very well planned out. Like, it doesn't seem like they're scrambling, trying to figure out what to do here and what to do there. Like, it seems like they've sat down, thought about this, figured it out. They're not flying by the seat of their pants like some other multiverse franchises that we've got going on now. So it all seems very contained and meticulously thought out. And just overall, this game doubles down on a lot of the goofiness in Final Fantasy VII. We saw it a little bit in Remake, but this game definitely has way more of it. And I just really love that balance of heavy emotional scenes and silly goofiness at the same time. It's something I just really enjoy seeing in franchises. That's why I like Yakuza a lot, using that element a lot, and I think it just makes the game great overall. And yeah, waiting for the next game, whatever it's called, is gonna feel like goddamn eternity. And the game definitely did hold a good bit back. As I said, we still don't know Cloud's truth yet. We don't really know much about Sid or Vincent yet. So it seems like the main premise now, which I kind of predicted, but we'll talk about more later, is that I think it's going to be Zack and Aerith bringing the memories back to the planet, and we're going to see Cloud's white materia get more and more full. But yeah, I am going to do a big breakdown of the previous theories I had for this game, the new ones I have, and I'm going to go over where I went wrong, the ones I got right, what my bingo card results were, and of course, like I said, where I think things are going to go now. Honestly, not too much of it's really changed that much. I think some of my core theories and ideas I had are still pretty afloat, but we'll go over that later. I'm also trying to get my first gameplay through. I did record it, trying to upload it. It just takes a long time to render all that stuff and upload it. I'm going to post a playlist of that. I'm not going to blast it out and have it flashed everywhere. As mentioned too, I'm also going to try to work on doing more detailed character ones, because I really want to talk about each character specifically, what I liked and didn't like about them. I'll probably pair them up, but yeah, if all that stuff's something that sounds interesting to you, or you want to take part in talking about that stuff, just leave me a comment, like, subscribe, and let me know if there's specific characters you want me to start with when I do those character things. I'm working on the theory stuff first. But yeah, I'm going to still have a lot of Final Fantasy VII content coming, but there's also a lot of games coming out I want to play and review as well. So, as always, drive fast, take chances. Later, nerds.